This is the Modulator from RJ Martin. This week's challenge will be a lot easier for people who've been form active for a long time and have a decent memory, but still perfectly solvable even if you haven't been. I'm going to make 3 claims about this knife which are strictly true but relatively misleading. Now, to be perfectly clear, I haven't done any of these 3 things, but it's perfectly possible to do the 3 things just as I've said, but again, the implication is there. So people will interpret the statements to mean something very different from the actual reality of what was said. The challenge is to fully describe the 3 statements, which will become more clear once I make them. The first statement is that I stabbed the knife into a piece of wood and I bent the blade 90 degrees and it returned a true, completely unharmed. The second claim is that I cut over 1,000 pieces of hemp rope and it was still shaving sharp. And the third claim is that I cut 300 pieces of heavy gauge extension cord and it was still shaving sharp. So what you actually have to do is explain how those 3 statements can be true. So in detail. Now again, to be specific, I'm not actually claiming that this knife can actually do that, but these have all been statements that have been made by knife makers at one point or another, and then through careful investigation by a number of people, it was found out that what they actually did isn't what people actually would assume that they did, and thus there's a heavy misleading implication in the statements. As an aside, a few people have asked about the bearing system in this, and is it the same as the bearing system in the ZT? No, they're relatively different. They both use thrust-based bearings. The ZT, however, uses an actual ball bearing based design, whereas the Modulator actually uses cylindrical based bearings in similar style housing. The difference is quite dramatic when you compare them to flippers with traditional housings. Now, there's many different influences on flippers that determine how fast they actually open. So not every traditional washer based pivot is going to behave like this, but just as an example, it's very easy with this to do a partial opening. So what I'm going to do is just press on the flipper until I barely get it to engage, and it's very easy to do that. All of these knives, by the way, have been tightened almost to the point of maximum on the pivot screws, and that's done for a number of reasons, because there's particular laws in Canada that you don't want to have very floppy knives for a number of reasons. In fact, with this one, it's actually difficult to do a full opening without a snap or actual vertical assist. The bearing based system on the ZT is actually that smooth that if you break the detent, the knife will actually just open under its own weight. And now I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it is very difficult to do a partial opening. I'm going to try again, so I'm just going to slowly apply enough force. It's very difficult. Once you break the detent, the blade's going to pop open. On the Modulator, break the detent. It doesn't have the same smoothness of opening of the ZT. It will be held in place. Again, not every Modulator will be like this. Not every ZT will be the one like I just had. But impossible to do a partial opening. As soon as you break the detent, the blade just snaps right out. And that's not a normal speed opening. Like, that's a normal speed opening. This is me trying not to open a blade, just slowly, 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 slowly. Nope. All the way out. So again, tremendous difference in the thrust-based bearing system. This is a cylinder thrust-based bearing system. This is an actual ball bearing-based thrust system. This, however, still performing extremely low. I did some rather extensive work with it recently. I had to sharpen it heavily 3 times. Still, the initial sharpness is very low. It's at most, even being a bit generous, less than 20% of where it should be, and that's being very, very careful trying to get it sharp. Still severe problems with the steel, and this is probably a combination of overheating by the factory and a relatively harsh acid soak, which you don't want to do on steel blades for a whole number of reasons. But I'm hoping that with some more use it's actually going to pick up, because as silly and as gimmicky as it is, and I agree it does have that speed hole look, there's no arguing about that, it's a very useful blade shape. Everything about it is well designed. The jimping has a very nice balance of aggression and comfort. The handle, while full of holes, is actually very well contoured, very nice wire framed clip, and all the little tiny sort of features on it don't really interfere with the knife, and they are kind of useful to have. You got the wire cutter, notcher, breaker that's in that. You got your wrench and your basically tapered adjustable. You got your seat belt cutter. None of these things really interfere with the function of the knife, and I'm kind of hoping that the steel picks up on this. As it is now, it's very, very, very low performance. And by low performance, I actually mean the durability is way beyond any steel that you would get. I don't mean it's like a cheap knife. Durability is even significantly worse than that. So I'm hoping that picks up.